Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a single, absolutely incredible visual metaphor about the human mindset. Sometimes it literally takes hundreds of pages to explain how our internal psychology shapes our external reality. But then, sometimes an artist just hits the nail on the head and maps the whole shebang out perfectly in just one single graphic. So let's jump right into the anatomy of psychological energy.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the optical illusion hiding right in plain sight. If you take a really close look at the trunk of this tree, it isn't just wood and bark. Actually, the outline forms two human faces in profile. They're completely back-to-back, looking in entirely opposite directions. It's just a brilliant way to establish right from the get-go that we're dealing with a duality here, a clear split between two fundamental ways of navigating the world. The source uses this tree to physically map out the pathways of our energy, basically drawing a literal line right down the middle of the mind.
And what's great is that the creator of this diagram doesn't just toss out vague concepts. They give us a very specific, highly structured architecture for this whole duality. In fact, our source explicitly identifies exactly 10 distinct traits for each of the two paths our psychological energy can take. Yep, 10 traits for the left side and 10 traits for the right side. It's perfectly balanced. And that tells us something huge. The capacity for either mindset is absolutely equal within us. So let's break down exactly what those 10 traits are, starting with that leftward-facing profile.
Okay, let's dive into this. The left side of this visual is explicitly labeled as negative energy. And honestly, before we even read a single word beneath that header, the visual cues just tell the whole story. Notice the ground. It's this dull, dry brown. The face in profile takes on that exact same muted, earthy tone. And most strikingly, look at the branches extending out from this side of the mind. They are completely barren. There's literally not a single leaf, no sign of life, no shade being offered anywhere. It's a really stark visual representation of an environment that yields stagnation and decay rather than growth.
Flanking those barren branches, the source gives us our first set of 10 traits. And they read: complain, sadness, lazy, selfish, hate, regret, ego, greed, anger, and violent. When you take a second to really absorb that list, you start to see a mix of internal feelings like sadness and regret, alongside external actions like complaining or being violent. But what binds them all together under this banner of negative energy is that they are all consumptive. They're just draining. They suck energy out of the system without putting anything nourishing back in. And well, that pretty much directly explains the totally lifeless state of the tree on this side.
Let's look really closely at those branches again, keeping that text in mind. Just imagine internalizing a feeling like regret or constantly acting out of pure ego. The source visually correlates these exact words with those stark, skeletal branches stemming from the leftward-facing profile. Because think about it, if a tree needs nutrients to sprout leaves, a mind needs constructive input to flourish, right? Words like sadness and greed are shown here as this sort of psychological winter. It's a state where the mind is just stripped bare and totally unable to bloom.
Now let's shift our focus a bit and see how this builds a really fascinating contrast when we peek over at the other side. Look at the escalation on the negative side for a second. Hate, anger, violent. These are harsh, destructive, and deeply isolating behaviors. But the source immediately offers an antidote on the opposite side. Right across from that destruction, we find words like forgiving, peaceful, and help. It's an incredibly stark comparison, really. It's literally the difference between breaking things apart and putting them back together. Which brings us fully over to the right side of the visual metaphor, appropriately labeled positive energy. And wow, the shift is absolute and immediate. That dry brown earth beneath turns into this vibrant, living green. Even the profile of the face on the right shares this lush green hue. And right above it, the branches are completely obscured by this massive, thick canopy of leaves. This side signifies vitality, photosynthesis, shade, and just pure life. It perfectly represents a system that is actively thriving and producing.
So what exactly is fueling this lush canopy? Well, the source gives us our second list of 10 traits, which are the exact counterbalance to the left side. We've got creative, honesty, motivated, confidence, forgiving, peaceful, happy, inspired, help, and bravery. Notice the forward momentum in these words? Motivated, inspired, creative, these are all highly generative traits. They build something brand new. And then you have honesty and confidence providing this incredibly strong, stable foundation. These 10 elements are presented as the exact psychological nutrients you need to grow a healthy, totally expansive mindset.
And this brilliantly illustrates the direct connection between our inner world and our outer reality.
When that rightward-facing mind leans into traits like being creative or feeling inspired, the visual result is literally an explosion of green leaves. The source isn't just saying, hey, positive energy feels nice. No, it's making the argument that positive energy creates a tangible, protective, and totally flourishing environment all around you. The leaves are basically the direct output of that positive input.
Let's drill down a bit into the internal states being contrasted here. On the left, we have regret and ego. Think about it. These are essentially anchors. They're either holding us in the past or just trapping us within a super self-centered perspective. The source directly mirrors these against confidence and honesty on the right, because honesty requires looking at reality clearly, completely without the distortion of ego. And confidence? Well, that requires looking forward, without that heavy anchor of regret holding you back. The duality here is just incredibly clear. One state traps you inward, while the exact opposite state projects you outward.
So the crucial point is really captured when we pull all of this data together into one place. Here's the complete side-by-side framework drawn directly from the source. Just look at this beautifully structured map. It perfectly contrasts those 10 negative energy drains right alongside the 10 positive energy drivers. We're talking complain versus creative, lazy versus motivated, selfish versus confidence. By presenting this in a simple table, we can clearly see the choice architecture of our daily mindset. It shows us that every single action or emotion on the left has a healthier, way more productive alternative just waiting for us on the right.
Now, to really bring this all together, we have to look at the very bottom of the diagram. Deep beneath the soil, beneath both the brown and the green earth, the roots of the tree plunge down. But notice how they interact down there. The brown roots and the green roots are actually shared. They intertwine in the exact same soil. They originate from the exact same base. And guys, this tells us something truly profound. The potential for both those barren branches of negativity and that lush canopy of positivity exists simultaneously within the exact same system. The paths completely diverge, sure, but the starting point, the root, is totally shared.
Which means, ultimately, this whole visual metaphor turns right back on us. The structure of the mind is entirely neutral at its base, right? It only produces what it's fed. Feeding those 10 negative traits is going to grow a barren branch, and feeding those 10 positive traits is going to grow a thriving canopy. The source lays out the map perfectly, but it leaves the next step entirely up to you. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to take away from our explainer today. Looking at these divergent paths, which roots are you watering today? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.